Welcome to Silver Tongue Saturdays. I'm Patricia Caspers, founding editor of West Trestle Review, and Silver Tongue Saturdays is sponsored by West Trestle Review, the Auburn Arts Commission, and the City of Auburn, and we are very happy that you are here. A couple of reminders before we begin. Please do wear your masks unless you're up reading. There is a sign-up sheet over here and also a tip jar if you're interested in tipping. And you can follow us on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, on YouTube. West Trestle Review has a website, westtrestlreview.com. Our new issue is out. It's beautiful, so you should go and read it. And there's also a mailing list there that you can sign up for. If you are following on YouTube, please like us, follow us, tell your friends, and we'll spread the poetry love, or the literature love. Let's see. This evening we'll begin with a poetry reading with Shelley Wong, and then we'll have a Q&A, and then there will be an open mic. And everything will be live streamed with the exception of the open mic. That will not be online. And I think that's everything. Oh, and I want to say thank you to my wonderful husband, Rick Caspers Ross, because he is fantastic with the technology. So Shelley Wong, I found her work online in 2014. And I'm concerned that she might think that I'm a stalker because I actually contacted the publisher and asked them if they would put us in touch so that I could invite her to send work to West Trestle Review. And they did, and she did, and I was so happy. And her poem that we published at West Trestle is Prayer after Frida Kahlo, and it was actually published in our Best of anthology for the year. It was our one and only best of anthology, Catenary, and it's a fantastic poem. And she has a new book out, and her new book is As She Appears, and it is a wonderful book. I highly recommend it. And instead of telling you what I think about it, I'm going to read the blurb from Kichi Cooper's. It is the rare first book that arrives fully voiced, but in Shelley Wong's As She Appears, we enter these pages escorted by a steady hand at the small of the back, a mouth carefully placed just beneath our ear, the warmth of the body realized beside us in each fierce and tender poem of queer womanhood. These poems are haunted by the living, by the most vital impulses among us, to love, to be present, to declare the self. And in these declarations lies a femme heaven, where we wander through poem after poem, each more lush and invigorating in their insistence. This is the book I have been waiting for all my life, and I have known for years that Wong would be the one to deliver it. I want to live inside its pages, take comfort as I wrap myself in its words. As Wong writes, we are the new names, the ones we've always known. When I read this book, I am every quiet queer girl with a desperate crush on the world. Isn't that a fantastic blurb? So let's go ahead and welcome Shelley Wong.
Thank you so much, Tricia, for that wonderful introduction, and thank you all for being here on a Saturday. I'm very honored. It feels very special to be reading as part of the West Trestle reading series, as part of my tour, since it's meant so much for the people who were there along the journey with the earlier poems and the poems that were published in my chapbook, Rare Birds, to come back again and support with the debut book. especially in pandemic times, all support is so greatly appreciated. So this book came out May 10th, but I've been promoting it since March in AWP. And so I've actually done 20 events in that time, both virtual and in person. The Bay is very active with readings, which is a beautiful thing. But I thought, as a transition, to share poems that I haven't been reading, since this is a special solo reading. But first I do want to start with the poem I always start with, which is the first poem in the collection, For the Living in the New World. There are so many ways to explore a forest, over clover clusters, past skunk cabbages, to a field where we listen for a ghost of song. The hypergreen periphery is the opposite of Los Angeles on fire. Any tree can become a ladder. These trees have too many branches, but it is not my place to revise them. I may be happiest improvising the language a body can make on a dance floor. We are just learning how female birds sing in the tropics. Spring insists we can build the world around us again. How has love brought you here? My head is heavy from the crown. And this collection, it took 10 years to come together, both in writing the poems and also submitting it for publication as a book. And it really is a gathering of many series. I know some books are like project books, but this book has several threads. So one is the Frida Kahlo poem thread, which dovetails into an art thread. There's a nature thread. There's a queer relationship and its aftermath thread, and there's a fashion thread. There's a nature thread, and they all kind of collide in various different poems. And in doing so, I wanted to kind of enact my own discovery as a queer Asian woman, writing into poetry where we don't often appear and where I didn't have many models, so trying to figure out those spaces and write myself into the art space. And so there are several poems that use different frames of art, whether it's painting with Frida Kahlo or theater or film or performance. And so I'm going to read those series of poems, which I don't usually read. So this first poem is based off of a Christian Marclay junk cut film, which is very fascinating. It's 24 hours long, and he and his team went through, I think it's all film clips whenever a time or a clock is shown or a watch time, and they sync them up so that it's 24 hours of seeing the different times in a 24-hour period. And so it's exactly 24 hours. So if you go to this museum to see it at 2 p.m., you're going to see images of 2 p.m. in the afternoon on this film. And so I went to my MFA at Ohio State where they screened it, and they had a couple days where they did keep the museum open and show it for 24 hours, so you could go late at night. And there was a certain trend that emerged. So this is called Women After Midnight. The red minute hand insists we sleep or commit to our rendezvous. On a deserted street, a woman exits the opera house, parading toward me in a single long shot. Tick-tock. It's our secret. Who is calling at this hour? A dark-haired man kisses Michelle Pfeiffer's spine with precision in digital clock light. Another man deletes a gagged woman from the frame. The camera says nothing. In black and white time, women sleep with painted lips, clasped shut like purses. A lamp comes on. For God's sake, it's 2 a.m. Bridget Bardot enters the kitchen, still clad in her red bustier gown, and drains the milk. A girl stumbles down a spiral staircase, fleeing from shadows in the piano dark. A girl wakes up when my hands clench her neck, as if it were a bell rope. She flails for the baseball bat, but this is her dream at 2:18. Slick stilettos come off first. A woman hangs up the phone and lies in bed like a floral question mark. The ferry departs on the half hour. You're so pretty when you sleep. So throughout this book, I'm interested in how women appear in art and where we don't appear, or how we're distorted, in ways in which I can write women into being. And so along with this thread, I was also really interested in theater and immersive theater, where there are these plays where the audience gets to interact with the actors. It's kind of like being in like a haunted house kind of situation, and they kind of sync up different actors to be with different audience members or groups of audience members. So it's kind of a surreal experience. There was this one play that was based on Alice in Wonderland, and so like the White Rabbit at times will be with you in a room, at times Alice will be with you in a room, at times you'll be with the audience members looking at Alice and Lewis Carroll together. And this is called White Rabbit. When I sit before the empty frame, I face a man. We are the audience as the Alices come between us. They lie back against each other like pages, blue touching blue. The dark-haired one approaches me, intent, almost writhing, but looks beyond, moving like a ribbon, and staring off at something unnameable. In the office, we paint roses harlot red. The White Rabbit crawls across cabinets and swings the lamp. Tick-tock, tick-tock. He exits and shuts me in. My cue to leap and open drawers. Locked, locked. White rose, white rose. At his desk, Lewis says, "You have split me in two. Are you getting this?" I peer down at my ink swirls and scratches. Yes, I say, because I'm loath to ruin illusions. Before we dress up, the Mad Hatter asks about my history of analysis. I play my part as if I'm as clean as an apron. Not all hatters are mad, you know. How is a writing desk like a raven, she asks. Feathers, I reply, and it is her turn to be silent. Lewis and Alice sway in the stairwell. She walks the banister and collapses into his arms, again and again, like the stumbling of the resolute or the damned. We watch, caught in the steps, suspended in a threshold. And this last one is based on a Marina Abramovic performance, which you can see on YouTube, called Rest Energy, where she's standing with her partner and he's pulling a bow and arrow back, and it's aimed at her heart, and you can hear their heartbeats on the audio, and it's just kind of this terrifying, gripping, maybe 2-minute clip. So this is called Invitation with 3 colors. It's come to this, I want the arrow between us. My dear, what do you know of blood? I forget and don't dream. My haunting, spring in abeyance, a black tie hunter and the unstartled prey. We fall away from each other like cut flowers. You drag back the trigger, the knife stem, as I pull the bow. Some love poems which kind of span nature and coast to coast from Fire Island, which is a barrier island off Long Island known for its queer community, and various other tidal landscapes. Walking across Fire Island, the ocean crashes and the bay rolls in. Planks creak along the boardwalk as a deer emerges. Umbrellas open like sudden fruit, while I inhale salt air, the fog that lifts off the brush. Here I can let the deer know me. The day trippers have sailed, and the sun is falling. A woman once said, "Deer are dumb." Dear or gentle friend or mother in question, perpetual guest, Long Island Duchess, beach hostess. I am in a floating year. They must all be related by now, the deer, like beaches. I imagine a deer stepping out of the ocean as water returns to me, rushing over my hands. Interlude. Walking through the hills, I heard leaves break, and through an enclosed fence, I saw a fawn pacing uphill toward me. As it skittered and turned, I heard no other companions. The fence was locked, so I whispered, "Go back," as it darted, like a child uncertain whether to disobey. It descended to the path below, where the buildings were closely plotted and dark. What happened to its mother, I wondered, as the cars passed behind me, heading deeper into the hills. Then the fawn returned and retreated in a repeat, like a pas de bourrée, seeing the lit park beyond. I took a photo and blinked, having set its distress aside for beauty. An unmotherly instinct, I thought, for a not mother. Albino. The white peacock is in love and is all that I see. Dear Spanish fan, immaculate flutter. His feathers undulate and ask to be touched. Soft prints, how your careful blankness staggers. The world defines itself by your plumed horizon. He preens in the dirt, struck by two peahens with cream-colored breasts and cerulean throats, their feathers gathered like brown arrows. He flirts his white crown and sways his doily array, but the ladies are busy with an itch. My trademark move, unpinning my highest hair. Look at me, he blooms, pivoting to display his beating wings. In the end, I will say that I too worshipped beauty, parading in my pastels. I fought and loved the silences. This book is organized by seasons because there's 4 seasonal fashion forecast poems. So I've been concentrating on reading like the spring and summer poems since that aligns with the debut journey, but I do have love for the winter and fall poems, so I'm gonna jump ahead in seasonal time and share some of those with you. This one is called Winter Pineapple with C. When the sun pierces my brick turret, I awaken with drawn-out limbs, a spare dancer, dreamless in a beam of dust. What's in my chest is not a fist nor a peony, but something knotted and harder to pull awake. I sense its shooting music and not its heat. Like a returning sea captain, I should place a pineapple by the door as an invitation for guests. Down the street, a tree strips to bone. Because she peeled my first peach, they rot in my kitchen. I keep buying them, though the thought of their sweetness stings. In the polar winter, snow erases snow. I leap over ice in a pineapple skirt as the wind sends its voltage through the low landscape. I see and tell myself I am seeing. Startle, startle, I say, a hand on my heart. How the season holds, rippling arpeggios, while I play a spectator, a flash of gold, a ship dropped in a stilled sea. Courtship. Instead of emojis, bring out the paper fans. If I hold the spread fan with the right hand in front of my face, I mean, follow me. Sometimes a trapeze does an extra swing or two while I steady my yes-no smile. Hey young man, don't shake the fire tree if you shiver at sparks. I have one tooth and the rest is bone. My skirts are tidal. I want to enter the pure gold restoration clinic by instinct, but lack the treasure. I try on crowns because I walk the walk. With age, we learn the lines of our bodies. Don't tell me what's unbecoming for a woman. I was raised on magazines. All trends wheel around. I can't say why the world is so broken, caught in a tunneling screen. Still, I aspire to be kissed by the sun. Exalt all women. I'm the tree coming back through the page. If I'm honest, most mornings my skeleton aches a little. If I unfold the fan slowly, wait for me. I find that I feel that poem more and more now that I've crossed over into my 40s. Just like, you need to hydrate, you need to stretch, need to take a nap, need to be in bed by 9 p.m. Yes, it's all fine. Let's see. I feel like I've done a little bit of traveling for my book tour. I was just on the East Coast, but I feel like on my Instagram and social media, like a lot of people are in Europe, and I'm so jealous, even though it's super hot there. But yeah, I haven't been abroad or to Europe since my 20s, so this is kind of a throwback to that time when I was doing the Eurail thing around the countryside. This is called Nole Me Tangere. The fields were scribbled on, or as blank as envelopes. To write about birds and not think hunter, not think bright cage for two. On the train, I slept in shuddering light. Through a bombed city, returned to its Baroque splendor. A friend once said, the body knows. I played the ingenue, the floating flower stalls lit through the rain, like a beautiful alphabet. The azaleas were a parting gift. As I drew a zipper, shut across the continent. Women are familiar with surrender and the appearance of it. Okay, these are kind of like the awkward dating poems. Yeah, I'm just gonna snuck those in at the end for variety. Okay. Beach date with end of the alphabet theme. What is the deal with nightingales? Orchids don't need perfume. They've got their immaculate beauty. You don't have too many questions as you arrange yourself around me. I didn't want to bring razors, but they were all I could think of. Yikes. In my sunglass sight, I scan the sand for signs of my shell. A tumbleweed rolls through. Hello, says the ocean, a kind of reverse umbrella. The sky is trying to stick to me like a Velcro. Water, clean this quiet. In conversation, I'm always waiting for my xylophone cue. His mouth is a yellow jacket, a blasted, wandering yellow jacket. I wish the zoo would start the stampede, the lions carrying me aloft. Night ride. He left a bouquet of knots around the trees. A different one each time he tied up the boat along the pond. A few circles, a repeated knot like a rose, a long branch wrapped like a latch. Once the rain stopped, we rowed the boat at night. Frogs crept in the footlights along the path and sent a chorus of yeahs, ringing around the water. We stopped rowing in the center. No stars, no words. We took in what the moonlight gave to us, and it was enough. Like when I looked at him as someone beautiful, not meant for me. I could not separate desire from catastrophe, shutting the doors by day, orbiting ecstatic in the dancing darkness, silver streaking my hair. This was the last poem I added to the collection since I felt like it needed a little more play and humor. And I mentioned my chapbook Rare Birds, and I always can't let go of the birds, gotta keep sneaking more birds in. So this one is called Softer, Softest. Like a band leader, one cardinal cuts through the filigree trees. The poet rolls her shoulder, wheels its notches, her muscles clicking out as if flexing wings. For each tiny leaf and bud, a pearl of rain. Last night, a man ripped his car down the street and danced in his headlights, so the neighbors came out and screamed into his trap song. Birds decorate the morning trilling. Is it you? Is it me? After too much caffeine, the poet sweats, sways, and tries to write a line about eternity. A bird possesses both a song and a call. All day she watched the glitter travel across the pond like television snow. A white pageant crowds her path as she revives the spiraling feeling, the last time a mouth ignited her like spring. And then, let's see. Things to close, I'm going to read the 4 seasonal poems. So these are the ones that demarcate the end of each season. Let's see. I'll go in the order that they appear in the book. So I'll start with summer and end with spring. So these poems began as trying to kind of create like a counterbalance to like the more personal post-breakup poem, and kind of to give the woman speaker kind of like these like women friends that are kind of think of them as like her backup dancers or like her clique or her girlfriends in the back like supporting her. But I was also thinking of fashion as play and transformation, since I always loved fashion growing up. I grew up in the 80s, which is like a very colorful time. I really loved Madonna, and Frida, who was a big influence, also really inspired Madonna, so I think I was always interested in just like fashion as expression, transformation, as a way of speaking without language in the world, and just like the play and possibility of fashion. I was also really interested in fairy tales, and so I loved fairy tale theater with Shelley. I don't remember over, or if you've seen that jump cut on YouTube where she appears in a different outfit in a different landscape. She's like, I'm Shelley Duvall, I'm Shelley Duvall. And then she's in the forest, she's in an ice storm, she's in a kitchen. So I kind of just like put all my interests and childhood curiosities in my poems, and this is what came out of it. So this is the first poem in the series, The Summer Forecast. Is it too late to go off the shoulder? Linen jumpsuits leapt over me as I cut pastel flowers off Highway 1. Whisper pink, lavender, spiked butter. I wore a long striped dress, a sailor ashore, longing to be a natural wonder. I take a page and sew by hand, piercing, piercing, then rip out and realign, bringing me to think of Penelope unraveling, coiling her colors back like a bad tide after another day untouched. But I am no lady in waiting. I gather the bouquet myself. Don't sleep on peonies, their intricate unfolding, whirling faces. I felt the cold weight in my hand as I approached softness with shears. The fall forecast. Every autumn, editors name the leaves anew. Burgundy, emerald, bronze, chartreuse. They want women to wear Europe, gemstone, antique metal steeped in liqueur, exclusively made by monks. It takes a strong woman to wear bejeweled armor and traipse through Germany, slightly buzzed. This season, the must-have mineral is rutilated quartz. Its embedded crystal needles mimic gold or rust. Such flaws are forgiven. If the line looks familiar, consider Chanel, who said, "Creativity is the act of concealing your sources." Boom. The recent is always losing luster. Perhaps the decaying leaf is the new beauty. When they say you're only as good as your last collection, one considers trends. Use bold text for counterpoint, stranger danger. Open the floor if the show becomes too matchy-matchy. Editors caress rough edges and think, how fond de siècle. Models dishevel in layers, cracking leather under the lights. The girls look like night trees. The winter forecast. This open interval, when nightgowns glow and stalk the field. In Chinese, 2 trees make a forest. As an inoculation against loneliness, models hold hands, clutch collarless coats. Who is she and where is she going? Her outfit has consequence. In French, the ocean is masculine, the sea feminine. How does a rhyme determine fate? Daughter, laughter, slaughter. 2 ways to survive, analog and digital. We can hear tree rings rendered as sound. Diamonds shine in icicles, in a spidering necklace. Aboard the single swan boat, she cries, not the underworld. Jump out of your big sister, Matryoshka. For the encore, the Kashmir girls sleep with velvet eyes, a finger to their lips, no trespassing on the runway. Women in black embroider orchids in the orchestra pit. And then I'll close with the spring forecast. Soon the sea. On the city corner, a tree asserts, I'm every shade of pink, like the inside. dresses as transparent as watercolor, doors flung open to receive gold arrows, stringing the strings. Skirts flare into bells, hair like bougainvillea. Once a stop sign before the water. Once he traced the arch of her foot. Women pack their illuminations in butterscotch leather trunks. The sea rushes from the lighthouse. What bloom says no? Her hand pedaling open. What you would do for a pied-à-terre with tall windows and flower boxes. A head full of leaves. Too many bows to tie, and what of them? Pluck the bestsellers, sandal ready, a pointed foot, pointed feet. Come out, my queens of color. On the archipelago, you are almost new. Don't turn back, the women are walking again. They soak in their many perfumes. Strings up, soon the island. Thank you.
Thank you, Shelley. So if you have questions, you're welcome to ask questions. If you could repeat the questions so
Sure.
people can hear it on YouTube.
I have a question. I'm always curious, how did you begin writing? When did you realize that you were inspired to write it? What was kind of the theme of your first poem?
Yes, okay, the question was, how did you begin writing and what was the theme of your first poem? Well, my mother was an elementary school teacher, and so she always read to me a lot growing up. She read to me so much that I would memorize books and people would think I could read, but I just memorized the timing of picture books and children's books growing up, so I went to the library a lot. But it was really in second grade, Mr. Daniel Coles, who was Canadian, he taught us poetry for Halloween. And so I think my first one was about spiders. And I think just being like a quiet, shy person who loved reading, I was like, oh, poetry, it has so much play and possibility, and it's short, and it can be like very descriptive and be its own kind of fragmented thing. So I think that was the beginning point. Thank you.
Can you tell us about your time at Fire Island?
Oh, yes. The question was to talk about my time at Fire Island. So this was Memorial Day weekend 2018. It's funny because I was just on the East Coast for the past 2 weeks, and I kind of traced the same journey of residencies, including Fire Island, and so it was really sweet to return and see the same people and share the poems that I wrote during that residency. So I had started in Portland, Maine, and then I went to Connecticut, and then I went to Fire Island. And so this was with the National Park Service. And so Fire Island is a 32-mile barrier island below Long Island. It's very narrow in certain parts. There are no cars on the island. It's primarily known as like a queer community, especially in the summer. But I was in like the straight national park area, which is like, there's a marina and there were a lot of day trippers. But I was there Memorial Day weekend, which is like prime time for all the New Yorkers going to the Hamptons, so it was pretty intense. But yeah, I had to load up a lot of luggage to be there for 2 weeks. And I had spent time in Fire Island for mini vacations when I lived in New York City from 2002 to 2010 with my partner at the time, who was very active in the queer community. We would sometimes have summer weekend trips there. So it was kind of like revisiting that landscape after that relationship, but also thinking of it as a community that kind of was and was not for me as like a queer Asian woman, which is interesting because there's I think it's called Fire Island. There's like this Asian gay rom-com based on Pride and Prejudice. I think it's on Hulu and it's on Fire Island. I was like, oh, this is very like timely, but also does not, I don't think, reflect the queer woman experience. So, gotta read the poems for the tie-in. But yeah, it was surreal to kind of be in that space and meditate on the relationship and get to know the landscape with the rangers. There's a long poem which I didn't read about walking through the landscape with the ranger who explains the trees and how the island was breached 3 times in a hurricane and 1 breach remains, so the ocean has cut through the island. But yeah, just thinking about the history of a place in terms of people and its creatures and plants, and the idea of sustainability and climate change, I think, is something that's haunting the book, as well as the idea of possibility of queer community for queer women of color, which I think is rare. But yeah, it's a beautiful landscape, and also really, yeah, there's a lot of deer, which is like very poetic, but it's just surreal to like see deer like on the beach. Just like you would never think, but they have taken over Fire Island. It's also where Frank O'Hara died. Yeah, he fell asleep on the beach. So there's a lot of things going on Fire Island. Yeah. But I really feel like those poems kind of became the heart of the book. So yeah, I'm grateful for that residency. Yeah. And it was just by myself in this ranger home, which is like 3 bedrooms. I was like on stilts because of flooding. So yeah, it was very isolated and fruitful. Yeah. Oh, sure.
A comment online about it taking 10 years to pull the collection together.
Mm-hmm.
Annie says hooray for perseverance.
Thank you. Thank you.
And she asks, are there any contemporary writers whose work you find particularly necessary or exciting?
Yeah. So someone in the Zoom room saying congrats on the perseverance for the 10 years and asking if there's works that I find, is it necessary?
Particularly necessary or exciting?
Particularly necessary and exciting. There's so many. Where to begin? I really love Aricelis Girmay, who's from Southern California, and I think lives in New York, and she writes beautifully about ancestry and family and sisterhood, and yeah, this very expansive and intimate and kind of like emotionally reassuring way, which yeah, just like I find so necessary and heartfelt. Also, I think Morgan Parker is also from Southern California. He's a brilliant poet who's also has like that expanse with like pop culture and the experiences of being a woman on her own terms, and navigating relationships and dating in a way which feels very honest and vulnerable. Sally Wen Mao, I think, is just like taking off in so many different directions and has been a core inspirational person for me. Yeah, I could go on and on, but yeah, I'd say those 3 people I think are really powerful and resonant and continue to be sort of lighthouse writers for me. Where like every time they publish a poem, it's like a holiday. So yeah, their work has meant a lot. Was there another question here?
I have a question about when you're writing your poetry. I really liked how you talked about the different subjects and themes and threads that into your book, and I was just wondering if that came about sort of organically, or if you know, I want to write another poem about a season, and or
thank you. So the question was, how I talked about like, the various themes that run through the book and whether that came organically or whether it was more determined. And it definitely was both. Since I wrote the fall and spring forecasts in graduate school, and then those are both in the chapbook, but then for the full length, I was like, okay, I'm gonna tiptoe into summer. And then like winter took forever, because like, oh, it's coming. No, winter's, but it's like, it has to be like in conversation with the prior series, but strong enough to not seem like too overdetermined. So that one took a long time of just like kind of being in the world and kind of waiting for that poem to emerge through kind of like scavenged pieces. But yeah, like being in Fire Island, I wrote without a sense of what I was writing, just kind of what my days led me to, either like mentally or in the landscape. And I did worry that I didn't have enough for poems to come out, but yeah, I'm really proud of like, I think there's 5 that ended up being the heart of the poem, of the book, within 2 weeks, which seems like incredibly generative in such a short time. But I think it also benefited from being like the 3rd residency I did in a row, so I think I had that momentum, which helped me at Fire Island. But yeah, I think that it stems from, I was 31 when I went to grad school, and it was a big transition for me to kind of like blow up my life and leave California and New York to go to the Midwest and be among like these very precocious millennials who are very smart because they like grew up with the internet. And yeah, I think just being in these workshops for almost 3 years, maybe 2.25 years, with the same people, often it's just like, I don't want to bring the same poem each time. I want to push it in different directions, because it's kind of just like being in this experiment lab. I want to see ways in which I can change the line, I can change the stanza, I can bring new emotional tones or topics to workshop, and just kind of like follow my curiosities and what I love once I've exhausted like things that come to mind, and just kind of like lean into, yeah, what I'm curious about, and then seeing ways in which those themes kind of overlap and intertwine. So yeah, it was tricky when putting together the book and finding ways in which to make it work in a way that seemed not too orchestrated, but in conversation and not repetitive. So yeah, I feel proud and relieved that kind of like the mess kind of settled into something somewhat, yeah, of a wavelength of experience, yeah, coming together. Yeah. Thanks.
I have one more question.
Sure.
It seems like you really live a life of poetry or writing. You seem to make a lot of time for it. So I'm just wondering, how do you do that?
So it seems like I make a lot of time for the life of poetry, and how do I do that? Well, I'm single and I don't have kids, so that's huge. Also, it did take 10 years, so it was a slow process of thinking. But yeah, I did go to grad school for 3 years, which was a luxury, and then I worked for 3 years in San Francisco, and I had come close to some fellowships, and I just decided to like take a year off and do residencies, which is like a big luxury, and at the time seemed a little wild because I was in my late 30s and I moved back in with my parents in Southern California because I had 2 cats, and so thankfully they took care of my cats because I didn't want to pay empty rent in the Bay Area, and it seemed too complicated. So yeah, I think that those precious residencies that I did really kind of gave me confidence in being among other artists in the community. But yeah, it was It took time, and in the years before, when I had a full-time job in communications, I really valued taking summer workshops, and so there are a lot in the Bay Area. There's Napa Valley, there's community writers, which we're like on the way to in Lake Tahoe, and there's so many now online. But yeah, I sought out ones in which I specifically wanted to work with certain poets, and I found that even if I hardly wrote that year, like that dedicated week of 7 days in a community of other writers with an amazing teacher gave me like 3 to 5 poems that was like good enough to keep me going. But yeah, I think that, you know, rest is part of the creative process, reading. There's so many amazing poetry podcasts, so much going on social media, and now with like streamed readings on YouTube, there's so much like abundance happening. So I feel like it's easier now to be, always have poetry or writing in your life. But yeah, I definitely am a fan of like taking your time and valuing your time. And yeah, sometimes it means like opting out of social things, just read or take time with your manuscript on weekends or nights. So yeah, I think just having patience and caring for your art when you can. Language will always be in your life and surrounding you, so kind of just like keeping your antenna up for when that happens and having a notebook to jot down those images or moments that you can return to later when you have more time to write is always, yeah, a good way to go.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
So before we say goodbye to our friends on YouTube, I just want to remind everybody that the next reading is 4 p.m. Saturday, August 13th, right here in City Hall. And the author is Andrea Ross, and she's no relation. And she's going to be reading from her memoir, Unnatural Selection, about her years as a wilderness guide, searching for her biological family. So I hope to see you all back here on August 13th.